Hey you guys, this week we are going to be making strawberry shortcake, and it's a recipe that I found on Pinterest. And so I thought that we would give this one a try. It's actually very similar to our rolled biscuit recipe in the fact that shortbread is actually a quick bread biscuit style recipe in and of itself. But with the one small exception of it does not require as much mixing. The dough is going to be a little bit more wet and sticky than the rolled biscuit dough was. It's not going to create that gluten and come together the same way. It's going to look a little bit different. And so we are also going to be experimenting with altering ingredients and making recipes a little bit more healthy. So instead of using flour for this recipe, I'm actually going to use blended up oatmeal. And so I will show you what that looks like. But I wanted to challenge you guys a little bit with a recipe that won't be negatively impacted with the rising action not working if we used a little bit healthier ingredients. So that's the challenge for this week. Make sure that you read your recipes before you get started and make sure that you have all your ingredients. And once you have all of your ingredients, make sure that before you get going with mixing everything together, that you preheat your oven so it's ready to go when you need it. Once you've blended your flour up, that's when you're going to want to measure it. So I actually had filled the blender up to the max fill line, and after blending the oats, this is how much it shrunk down. So don't pre-measure and then blend and add to your recipe. Blend and then measure and add to your recipe if you're gonna try using oat flour like I am. All right, so after blending my flour or blending my oatmeal up, I measured and leveled 2 cups and dumped it into my mixing bowl. And now I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of sugar. So unlike our rolled biscuit dough last time, or 2 weeks ago, this recipe is a sweet dough, all right? So I've got 2 tablespoons. I'm gonna see if maybe I've got just enough in this bag. Make sure you don't measure over your mixing bowl so you don't get too much. All right, I need a little more sugar. So make sure that you measure and level all your ingredients so that you don't get too much, because like we always say, baking is chemistry, and we want our stuff to turn out right. So, but this one is such a fun recipe because it's so easy. You just throw everything in one bowl. How nice is that? So I like to use organic, and I like to use raw sugar so that it's not bleached. Like I tell you guys at school, I'm always trying to get you the best stuff. So the sugar I bought today, it's a little darker than the other one. Let me pull them up for you to see. But that's okay because they are both cane sugar. They are both what the recipe calls for. One's a little bit more grainy than the other one, but that is okay. So the brown sugar, it's called Demerara. I don't know. How do you say it? We're going to pick up as we go. Make sure you get your sugar bag closed. It would be a shame to have that open up and spill all over the place. All right. So next we need to add in our baking powder. So remember with our baking powder last week, this is what causes a little bit of a rising action to take place in our baking. So it's important that we use the right powder, whether it's baking powder, baking soda, and that we also get the right amount. So get out our covered. We get our baking powder. And this recipe calls for 1 tablespoon of baking powder. Don't you just love it when the recipes don't make you get out too many utensils, so you don't have to do too much cleanup at the end? It's my favorite. So remember, we level off on the inside of the baking powder container. I'm going to add my 1 tablespoon of baking powder. And then, just like we did with our rolled biscuits, we're going to sift. You can use a fork to do this. We're going to sift our flour, sugar, and baking powder together. And do you remember last 2 weeks ago when we did those biscuits, I told you if you used salted sweet cream, you actually do not need to add salt to your recipe. So instead of adding salt to our biscuit dough, we are using salted sweet cream. So we have to push those dry ingredients to the sides of the bowl, now that we've got them all mixed together, and create that well in the center. And then we are going to add our liquid ingredients. All right, so we are ready to add our butter in now. You want to make sure that you're cutting in cold butter to your recipe. So keeping it cold means that it's going to release a little bit of steam when we put it in the oven to bake, and that is going to also add to the rising action that's taking place, and it's going to make our biscuits a little bit flaky. So you're cutting in cold butter, and we need 1/4 of a cup. So if you recall, that was the same amount that we used with our biscuits last time. So we're going to cut on the line. So we've got 4 tablespoons equals 1/4 of a cup. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you don't believe me, you can check right here on the stick. So and then you can use a fork, you can use 2 forks or two butter knives to cut in your fat, or if you have, did any of you guys look up a pastry blender? If you have a pastry blender, you can use that. And then we're going to cut our fat in, and you should still see flakes of butter in this, in the dry ingredients. You will not see it completely mixed in. So when I am cutting the butter in, I kind of like to shave it a little bit so that it's coming off of the stick in flakes, and that makes it a little bit thinner. And I think that makes it a little easier to cut in if it's not all in big chunks. So before we continue cutting in the fat, we are actually going to make some buttermilk for our biscuits. And a lot of you kids are going to look at this and go, buttermilk, what's that? And then you're going to see me make it and you're going to go, but here's the cool thing. The vinegar, so when you make buttermilk, I don't like to buy it because I don't drink it. I only use it in pancakes and biscuit recipes sometimes. So when you make buttermilk, it's equal, it's 1-to-1. It's a 1-to-1 ratio. So 1 cup of milk to 1 tablespoon of white distilled vinegar. Okay, so we are going to make our own vinegar right now, and we're going to let it set up for a couple of minutes while we are cutting that fat in, because we want to let the vinegar separate the milk a little bit. So remember, when we measure our liquids, we measure them at eye level. I need 1 cup. So my eyes need to be on the same level as that 1 cup line. Is that good? Perfect. And then we are going to add, remember it's 1-to-1, 1 cup to 1 tablespoon. So if I wanted to double this, I could. We are going to add 1 tablespoon of white distilled vinegar. It has to be white distilled vinegar. It cannot be apple cider vinegar or balsamic vinegar. It can only be white distilled for what we're doing. So 1 tablespoon. And what you will notice is that the vinegar is going to start to separate the milk a little bit. but that's okay. This is going to react with the baking soda and the sugar, and you are not even going to taste the vinegar in this recipe. So it's all for the chemical reaction purpose that we want to take place. So now that we've got our fat cut into our dry ingredient mixture, let's check. There's our buttermilk. Okay, so it's separated. All right, so now we got to recreate that little well in the center of our dry ingredients. And then we're going to pour our buttermilk into the center, and we are going to just stir until combined. And remember, this dough is going to be sticky. It's not going to come together nice and smooth like the rolled biscuit dough did. It's going to be different. Also, when you're done with your buttermilk, make sure that you add some water to it because it'll dry the sides of the liquid measuring cup. It gets a little tricky to clean. Something to note about using oatmeal, it will start out thin, and you might think this is way too thin for your recipe, but it will absorb moisture while it rests. So we're going to let this bowl rest while we clean our strawberries and prep those, and then while we prep our heavy whipping cream. And we've got one last ingredient to add to this. We are going to zest a lemon. So that means where you take the outside, the yellow shavings of a lemon, and add them to the recipe. So before I do that, I'm going to wash the outside of my lemon with soap and water to make sure that it is clean. I want lemon zest, not lemon zest and pesticide. So if you have never zested a lemon before, it's actually kind of cool because you can go to the store and you can get a lemon zester. It kind of looks like a piece of silverware, but then it's got 3 little circles on the end of it, and you shave the lemon like it's a razor. Or if you don't have that on hand, you can use a potato peeler to peel the outside of the lemon, and then you would just use a paring knife and dice it up really fine. Or you can use a fork to shave the rind of the lemon. So I'm going to show you with a fork. I actually prefer that method. So you're going to hold your lemon in your hand, and you're going to just start to score the outside of the lemon. Now you want to be careful that you only get the yellow of the lemon, because if you get into the white part, it starts to get a little bit bitter. So you just carefully want to scratch the top, and we only need a teaspoon, thank goodness, because once you guys do this, you're going to go, Miss Baloo, what were you thinking? Because it actually is a little bit difficult, not difficult, but it takes some time. It's a little time consuming to score your lemon. The other way that you can do this, if you're getting frustrated with the fork method, which you very well could, you can also take a paring knife. If you're going to do this, maybe have mom or dad help you, and then you just shave back and forth. I guess I kind of lied to you. This is really my favorite method over the fork method. It takes more time, but I'm going to show you here in just 1 second. You'll be able to tell because it shaves the yellow color off of the lemon and leaves all of that white. You have to have a gentle touch, and I did not have a gentle touch with the fork. Fork side, shaving with the knife side. Isn't that cool? Such a neat thing. But this is just going to add a little bit more of that citrus flavor to our summery dessert. All right, so I'm going to continue zesting this lemon, and then I will bring you back when I'm ready to enter it into our recipe. All right, so just to give you an idea, this is a teaspoon. Okay, so I'm going to pause and see how close I am to having my teaspoon of lemon zest. Okay, so we are pretty close. If you're at the store and you're getting your lemons, if they're pretty small, make sure you grab 2. I am a little more than halfway around my lemon at this point. And so I think we're gonna squeak by with just enough. And if you don't have a whole teaspoon, it's okay. It's just adding a little extra something to your recipe. Not the end of the world. And you'll learn for next time. And that's always okay too. So this is our oatmeal batter after letting it rest. It's absorbed that liquid you see. We've also added in our lemon zest. So now we are ready to either use a spoon to drop spoonfuls of dough onto our cookie sheet to bake, or if you have a cookie dough scoop at home, you can use your cookie dough scoop to drop spoonfuls of batter onto your cookie sheet to bake your strawberry shortcake biscuits. So this is what your shortbreads should look like when you do spoonfuls and drop them onto your cookie sheet. I am going to put these in the oven and bake them for about 20 minutes, and then we will see how they look when they come out. You can make these ahead of time and freeze the shortcakes, but you want to make sure you bake them first and that you don't let it sit too long, because that gas will escape and they won't rise quite right. So this is a little bit of a denser dough, so I'm not expecting a whole lot of a rising action to happen, but it's not supposed to rise a whole lot anyway. Shortcake is supposed to be dense and flaky. So I'm really excited to see how these turn out, and I'm also really curious to hear what healthy substitutions you guys make. So instead of using white flour, what flour substitution do you think that you will do? And because we didn't use any egg, and you can no longer smell the vinegar from the buttermilk, so I want to know if anyone else likes to taste test the batter, because it's actually really good. I hope you guys have fun making these, and I'm looking forward to seeing what your final biscuit product looks like. All right, so we are going to do our heavy whipping cream. So I've poured my whipped cream into the bowl, and I know I explained this to you guys last time. So I just want to run through a couple of quick things. When I do my whipped cream, I just do the heavy cream. I don't add any sugar to it. If you want to add sugar, I know grocery stores are sometimes out of things by the time we can all get to the store. So something that I do when I need powdered sugar, I will take my granulated sugar, like the sugar that we used in our biscuit dough, and I will blend it up in my blender like you saw me do with the oatmeal, and I will add that to my whipped cream mixture. Now, if you buy powdered sugar at the grocery store, what you're going to find is that they add cornstarch to it. I have not had any issues without adding the cornstarch, but just so you know, there is a way around if you don't have any powdered sugar at home, or if you can't find any while you're at the grocery store. I'm going to whip up the whipping cream just like I did for the dream cake, and then I'm going to add a little vanilla extract at the end. So I'm going to turn off the sound so I don't torture anyone's ears, and I will show you the stages of setup for the whipping cream. And remember, don't over whip it, because if you do, you will end up with butter, not whipped cream. All right, so we are going to hull out our strawberries. So that means to remove the core from the center. So I'm going to take my knife and carefully remove that core. I just don't like to waste much of the strawberry. And then we are going to keep our fingers back, and we are going to slice our strawberries into thin slices, like so. And then they're going to go into a bowl, and I'm going to toss them with a little bit of sugar and some lemon juice from that lemon that I zested earlier. So you don't even have to remove the stem if you don't want to. Sometimes it just makes it a little easier to see what you're doing. Okay. And don't be afraid to ask mom or dad for some help with that part of coring the strawberry. Otherwise, if no one's home to help you and you're worried, you can just take off the end. Just make sure you get all of that. Okay? And then keep your fingers back when you're thinly slicing your berry. I'm going to take my lemon and I'm going to cut it in half. I'm going to use the side that's a little more beat up from my fork. I'm actually going to take my fork and I'm going to use it. Oops, get closer to you. So I'm going to take my fork. You don't want any seeds in there, so you can pick out your seeds. And you're going to put the fork into the lemon and twist. And that'll pull some of that juice. And you want to be careful. You may not want to get too much, because then your strawberries can be a little tart. But we are going to add, once we finish hulling our strawberries, I'm going to hull the entire container. So got my lemon juice in there. So I'm going to hull an entire container of strawberries. So it's a 3-pound box, or I'm sorry, a 1-pound box. 1-pound box from Hy-Vee. And I'm going to add those in there with a tablespoon of sugar. And then just make sure if you got any seeds in there, you pick those out. Don't want any of your family or friends choking on lemon seeds, right? Will be a little bit nicer than that. And then you're going to toss your berries in the lemon juice and strawberry mixture. You don't have to add the lemon juice if you don't want to, if you don't want your dessert to be too tart. I just kind of like that flavor, so I added that to mine. So you can do that if you want to try something new. All right, so this is how our biscuits turned out. So we had a little bit of a rise, but not much. So if yours don't rise a whole lot, don't worry about it. It's not the end of the world. Remember, we did a denser flour. We used oatmeal to make them a little bit more healthy. And that batter was a little bit more wet and sticky than the biscuit dough that we made 2 weeks ago. So remember, different dough, different results, and that's okay, because I bet they're still gonna taste awesome. And typically when you see this dessert, it is crumbled with whipped cream and strawberries on top. So you could do the drop biscuit formation like I did, or I've even done it where I pour all of the batter into a cake pan and bake it into one layer and then just cover it with whipped cream and strawberries. But I thought we'd go for a little different look this time.